Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Well, hello, my friends. Hey, welcome to episode 196 with a special guest, Drew Paige. Drew is a mental health advocate and author out of Chicago, and she is here today discussing her memoir, The Darkness Within, that came out this past August. In the interview, you're going to hear all kinds of important information about mental health and bipolarism, the types of bipolar, which that was new to me. I didn't know there was different types. How to identify it, and dealing with mental health, along with lots of great information about the book, how the book came about, and how Drew deals with this on an everyday basis. It is a fantastic interview that I cannot wait to share with you, so stay tuned. It's coming up here in just a moment. Meanwhile, I'm back, everyone. Yeah, I took a unplanned leave of absence. Not to draw any attention to it, because those of you who are checking out an episode once in a while, you don't know any different. But I actually ended up with a couple of weeks there where I was the lone person at work, and it really consumed my time. Between that and having the phone switched to me 24 hours a day over a 2-3 week period, preparing my book, Bandit Rising, which did come out to great success, October 22nd, and just a lot of life things going on. It was just good for me to take a little break and have a little breather, and at no point did I even once consider, am I going back? Do I really want to go back and do the show? No, I never did that even cross my mind of not coming back. I love doing this show. I love talking to my authors, and I love getting to hear back from you all. And we are back, and this is episode 196. We are closing in quickly on episode 200. You'd think after a couple of weeks away, I'd have things nailed down on what I'm going to be doing. I do have a plan for something for episode 200, but I'm still working out the details. Suffice to say, we are going to have more authors coming up, and more interviews, and the show is not stopping anytime soon. So, as I mentioned, Bandit Rising came out. It's been 2 weeks now, October 22nd. Fantastic. It did really, really well for the release date, and it's actually been selling very steadily ever since. It seems like I've got sales and page reads every day. It's a quick read. Ended up coming in a little over 50,000 words. All total, plus I have a sample chapter from book 2 in the series included at the end of it. The paperback turned out incredible. I absolutely love it. Oh, and I did it in the 5x8 platform. So it's a smaller paperback. It's much closer to the classic old paperbacks, that you would actually put in your back pocket. It's so much closer to that size, and I absolutely love that for Bandit, because Bandit is such a throwback. It's that 80s science fiction alien invasion thing with all these movies that he quotes and stuff, from the 80s. So it really has that good feel to it. And thank you everyone who's been following along and checking out the book. And it's been a great time. And I look forward to working on the next one. I'm doing that right now with NaNoWriMo. That kicked off November 1st, which actually that's today as I record this. So, and so far I have not written word one. Anybody who's been following the show knows that I did start book 2 years ago. Actually, when I finished book 1, I started book 2. I worked on it for a while, only to realize later that I had mixed up my storylines and was going into book 3 with the story. So I've actually gone back through ever since Bandit 1 came out. I've been going back through and fixing up the timeline and taking things, moving stuff around, and I'm getting ready to start fresh, start brand new with Bandit 2 later tonight, I guess. So looking forward to that, and with any luck, we'll have book 2 out here in a few more months. As always, I want to thank our sponsors, starting with the affiliate of the show, Writer's Block Coffee. I love this coffee, and you really have got to try it out. They right now they've got 3 different incredible flavors. The signature Writer's Block Coffee is their signature blend. There is also the Deadline Dark, and my own personal favorite, the Whiskey Barrel Aged Coffee, which, oh my gosh, that is so good. You can sign up for a one-time order or do auto pay so that you never run out. And don't forget to use the code SAMPLECHAPTER whenever you go to checkout and save yourself 10%. I also want to thank returning sponsor, Scrivener. I'm doing all of my writing through Scrivener, and all of this work I've been doing on books 2 and 3, and in 1 for that matter, has been so much easier because of Scrivener. Hey, check out this advertisement and learn how you can save 20% on the regular desktop version. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. Thank you once again to Scrivener. I love having them here with me on the show and renewing that friendship that we've been together for so long now, 2 years. I also want to thank my podcast friends, starting with Pop Goes the Culture Network, home to about half a dozen other shows, all of them pop culture related and all of them incredible. So click that link in the show notes to find out more. And I want to thank my brand new bunch of friends at the Author Library Network that we are now a part of. And just so many great shows. I'm still going through some of them myself. I had the invite a couple weeks ago, and I think I mentioned it in the last episode, but I haven't had a chance to follow up and complete the membership up until today, and that's pretty much all I've done so far is just completed the membership. But some old friends are on there with their old shows, members of the Project Entertainment Network that we were previously part of. A lot of those shows, the writer-themed shows anyway, moved over, and we are a part of that. So make sure you click that link in the show notes to find out more about the Author Library Network. All right, everyone. Well, it's been great catching up with you, and I look forward to doing that more in the coming weeks. But without further ado, I think it's time to get on over to our interview with our guest, Drew Paige. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back to another delightful episode. I cannot wait to introduce you to today's guest, which is Drew Paige. Drew comes from Chicago, and we are having a wonderful chat about her new mental illness book. It's a memoir, and just so much good stuff that I can't wait to discover along with you, the listener. And without further ado, Drew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I am very, very honored to be here. I think it's going to be a really great show. So thank you.
Well, the honor is all mine, and I'm so glad that we worked this out. I'm glad that you were able to come on, and I mean, you have a fascinating book that I cannot wait to dive into. But can you give us, I guess, without going into the book yet, let's hear a little bit about about you and what you do.
Sure. So, I started in the mental health field when I graduated from Bradley University back in 98, and I'm 45 years old, and I really wanted to help people. So I went into psychology, and my first job out of school was a mental health professional. I basically was a caseworker for people with severe mental illness. And, growing up, I was abused by my father. And on the outside, it was this perfect, wealthy, you know, family. I have two sisters, a beautiful mother, and a dad. And, my dad was a very successful divorce attorney. And little did anybody know on the inside, from the age of 8 years old, my father was verbally abusing me. And then it escalated to him slapping me when I was 12. And then when I was 14, I was home alone. And hence my first chapter, The
Mm.
Night That Changed Everything. He brutalized me and I could have died. So that incident in itself changed my life forever. And it triggered mental illness, which I never understood until age 30 when I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder.
Oh my. Uh, Now you took some time to really deal with this for a long time, kept it within yourself, and then at what point did you decide you're ready to write a book about this?
It's so bizarre. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, now let me just preface this with I've been keeping journals since I was, not even kidding, 7 years old,
Mhm.
up until my 30s.
Mhm.
So, I have like my whole lifeline written out. I've always been a writer, nobody's known about it. And I read a memoir at the beginning of the pandemic and I was like, oh my God, I have a story to tell. I think it's time. So
Mhm.
I submitted chapters randomly, right? Never thinking anything of it. And the publishing company loved it and they're like, done. And so I literally wrote my story in 5 months, which is
Oh wow.
unheard of. But I've been holding in all this trauma, for how many years? My whole life.
Oh my gosh. Man, I'm trying to gather my words together. That's amazing. Uh, so so the book title is The Darkness Within. It
Yeah.
is you can always come out of the other side of your trauma, which thankfully it seems like you have done a remarkable job of doing such. Can you give us a little bit about the book, where I believe you
Oh,
have
yeah.
some author notes?
Yeah, I'm going to read the author note. I think it's really going to, change the narrative about mental health and kind of, I write like I speak. So I think it's kind of engaging with the reader.
Hmm.
So I'll start. When we are brought into this world, no one tells us how difficult life is. It is like when you're getting married. Not one person at the wedding says, hey, this shit is going to be really hard. Good luck. Nope. They congratulate you, ask you when you are planning a family, tell you to enjoy the honeymoon. This is how I look at my life. It has been a journey, and not one person has told me how to navigate it. I have had to figure out life on my own. After 44 years, I felt it was my time to share my experiences with mental illness. I wanted to share the trials and tribulations I have experienced navigating life with a diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder. From my own life journey, I want others who have family members with mental illness or they themselves have a mental illness to feel normal, not stigmatized by what society says mental illness is. Discrimination occurs when people talk about mental illness. Many people believe that people who are mentally ill are dangerous or crazy, when in fact, people who have a mental illness, including me, are just like everyone else. People who have mental illnesses also have steady jobs and function in society just the same as other people do. They have ongoing and lasting loving relationships. The only difference is that people who have a mental illness have symptoms they have to manage daily. With the right treatment team, having a functioning great life is possible. I was physically, verbally, and emotionally abused, as well as covertly sexualized by my own father. In response to the trauma of what was happening to me, I began to have symptoms of a mental illness at a very young age. When I was 30 years old, I got the diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder. Living with a mental illness my whole life, I have had to hide it. I am still hiding it, and many of my friends do not know about my illness. The shame of letting others know. My secret was and is too much to bear. I've worked in a mental health facility as a mental health professional for the past year. I have learned from working with people who have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, bipolar 1 disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and many other disorders that you can always come out the other side of your trauma. It has been a transformative experience working with so many who have had such a positive outlook on their lives and their illnesses. The illness did not define them, it was just a part of who they were. My time there made me realize I did not need to continue hiding behind my mask. I came into this world a clean slate, and the rest was up to my parents to shape me into the person I grew up to be. I used to blame my father for my illness. I was so angry at the fact that the abuse made me the way that I am with my diagnosis. I now no longer set blame upon my father because through therapy, I have chosen to not live in the anger that I felt. I have empathy for the abusive experiences that he had encountered as a child, but I have also not forgotten what he did to me. I want to get back to who I was before he took what was rightfully mine, my authentic self, which I am relearning through the healing process of therapy and the right medication. I am still the kind, empathetic, funny, fun, good mother, wife, sister, daughter, also a good friend to those I have let get close to me. Having a mental illness is not easy, and it is something I struggle with every day. Unless you experience symptoms, it is hard to understand what the person who deals with them daily is going through. Family and friends unfamiliar with mental illness often struggle with how to cope with a loved one's symptoms and a diagnosis. The takeaway I want you to have after reading this book is that living life while managing symptoms of a mental illness is a process. We have choices how we choose to cope with the things that happen to us in life. We can have dysfunctional avoidant behaviors and blame the world for our own pain, or we can choose to do the internal work to heal our hearts and minds. I am choosing to do the internal work. I am so tired of living with the ups and downs of shame and guilt and self doubt. As I have written this book, I have experienced a cathartic release of emotions that are helping set me free. If you are reading this book, I want you to see a part of yourself in my writing. Many people experience symptoms of mental illnesses without even realizing it. I would have been so grateful to have read something that I have identified with as a young person or even as an adult. I am hopeful that my book will bring awareness regarding mental illness, and I want whoever is reading this to feel accepted and validated in their thoughts and feelings. My story is one of the underdog. I did not let the darkness take over the light that was always waiting for me. I was told by a close friend that pain transfers into art. This book is my art.
Wow. So now I'm one of those people who I've never dealt with myself. Mental illness. I'm very positive, and for me, the glass is always half full. I'm always very, very positive thinking.
Yes.
So understanding mental illness and even suicidal thoughts
Yes.
is very foreign for me at times. And my wife is a suicide prevention awareness trainer when it was one of the things she did in the military. And so we were like trying to figure that out. Like she was wanting to explain it to me.
Right.
So with that in mind, then I guess some of the questions I would have is, can you explain to some of us what bipolar 2 disorder is?
Interesting. I actually wrote down exactly what it is. So there are two, this is the thing with mental illness. There are two different types of bipolar. There is 1 and 2. And I want to read out exactly what they are so the listeners understand what they are. Because listen, education is power, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So bipolar 1 is you have trouble sleeping. You are exhibiting a lot of energy. You're acting as if you can achieve anything you want. You're looking and acting weird, agitated. It's mania and depression. So somebody with bipolar 1 usually it's like the people I worked with in the facility. They have a very hard time functioning in the world. Okay. Socially, they have a hard time getting a job because it's a very high and a very low. So with bipolar 1, they have an inability to realize their behaviors are inappropriate. So they could have this conversation, right? But it's never really balanced. it's very erratic. And it's very hard to have relationships with somebody with bipolar 1, because unless they're on the right medication and have a wonderful treatment team, because it is possible. But that is bipolar 1. Mania looks as, going on shopping sprees, spending like $10,000 on their credit card when they don't have the money,
Hmm.
sleeping with a lot of people, promiscuity, and there's always major consequences to the actions. And then depression is suicidal ideation, not taking care of their hygiene, hibernating in their homes, not wanting to have any contact with anybody, sleeping all the time. As you can tell, it's very, opposite, meaning bipolar, right?
Yeah.
So that is one. Two, like me, it is very functioning. You can have jobs. You can, the person has at least one hypomanic episode. So, that basically hypomania is like hyper,
Hmm.
but, fast speaking. But to people on the outside, it looks like a person who's really fun and outgoing, and people are like a magnet around them.
Yeah.
You would never know that the person has this diagnosis.
Hmm.
And it also has like the depression piece, definitely, but it's the depressed mood. It feels sad, empty, hopeless. And it does have the depressive, symptoms as one, and it can get as bad as one, but also like the medications and the treatments for two, because you are more functioning in society and you have a better grasp, or you're more self-aware.
Hmm.
It's easier to live with two rather than one.
I see. Okay. And it's funny because all these years I've heard of bipolar. This is the first time it ever clicked with me on the name, how it came to that
And
name.
yeah,
That is
it's like,
fascinating.
yes, and it's very interesting because it takes a lot of work to get to a space like I have. There are so many different therapies that help the chemical imbalance in somebody's brain that brings upon this diagnosis.
Hmm.
And if you do the work, and if you have the right medication treatment team support, you can live a great functioning normal life. Is it
Mhm.
easy? No. It's hard,
Yeah.
but you're willing to do the work. And if you have a good grasp on who you are as a person, you'll be okay,
Hmm. Now, is I understand that bipolar is a chemical disorder.
Yes.
Uh, is this something that is natural, or is it brought on by trauma?
Interesting. I love these questions. So I'll give you a perfect example. So my sisters and I grew up in the same home, obviously,
Hmm.
and children who witness trauma in the home, everybody is predispositioned to have a mental illness. Okay, everybody,
Yep.
and it's genetic, right? We all have this genetic DNA, and from our mother and father, and if there is mental illness on both sides of the family, on one side of the family. So basically, if something triggers that trauma in somebody's brain, for myself, it was brought upon by severe abuse. And because I had severe abuse, something in my brain triggered a chemical imbalance. Now, what is
Mm.
so devastating about this, and it makes me so sad, is that after I wrote this book when I was 44, I'm 45 now, but it took me last year writing this book through research to realize, if that never happened to me, if my father had never brutalized me, I never would have had this diagnosis.
Wow.
So it's really a matter of, the trauma and what experience you have in your life. Now, certain children, they experience trauma, but the chemical imbalance doesn't click in their brain. They obviously might have behavior issues, but sometimes it doesn't trigger that illness. It just depends on the individual.
Hmm. That's fascinating. And yeah, I mean, and as a writer, I mean, that helps inform me. I feel like I'm going like, oh my gosh, that could explain this character I have in my head,
Right?
what's going on with them, and some things like that, or something that could be triggered and whatever. So that's amazing
Yeah.
information.
Thank you. And what's so awesome about my book is every single symptom, detail, traumatic experience, relationship experience, I have research that backs it. I've never read a memoir, especially a mental health memoir, that has research ingrained in the narrative.
Mm.
And because I have so much education, not only working in the field for 13 plus years, I also have life experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
it's like on both ends, I'm so full of knowledge in this field that I can just talk for days about why and when and what, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, how has writing the book helped you in life, and has it helped you with your work?
Yeah, it's helped me in different ways. You know, writing the book, I was in a deep therapy, and it was this eye movement desensitization therapy, and I did it every week. And what that is you go through a traumatic experience with your therapist, and then she does this hypnotic thing with her finger, and you have to process what happened to you. And through writing this book, I was doing that therapy that was allowing me to feel emotions while I was writing. Because if you read my book, and when I read you the first chapter, the details are so specific because
Mm-hmm.
my post traumatic stress, as I was writing, I'm reliving the trauma. So writing the book was pretty traumatic for me, but I have to be honest with you, I started working with a wonderful man who read my story and he wanted to write a screenplay to turn my memoir into a film.
Oh.
So there's importance behind this story. His name is Devix, and I connected with him on Twitter. He had mentioned something underneath my post about my book, and he read my book, and it really hit at the core of him. And he's like, I want to work on this with you. So he came to Chicago, and we worked on the screenplay together. He's a brilliant, brilliant man, and a wonderful actor, and an incredible writer. So my breakthrough,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't experience writing this book, was when we worked on the screenplay, and I had a breakdown, which I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
It was really hard. I feel it's been difficult, you know, talking about trauma over and over. What's happened to me has not been easy. It's
Yeah.
been difficult.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I find extremely admirable, and I don't think this is specific to bipolarism, I think it's specific to anyone with trauma, is how you have come out on the other side. You, in your words, the fight was worth the battle, and you don't hold blame looking back on it. You're moving forward. And
Yes.
I find that extremely admirable. But how did you get to that position? Like, how did you find yourself in the position where you're ready to go, I'm ready to live now, instead of back then?
Honest, I'm going to be 100%. It's a day to day.
Yeah.
Some days are better than others. It's a journey. I talk about that in my last chapter. You know, I present, you know, very put together and articulate and certain things, but the truth is it is a day-to-day fight. And some days I wake up and I call it a game of Russian mood roulette. You know, it is exhausting living in my brain. I choose to fight because I feel like I can help people. I have daughters to raise. I have a family, and I think my life is worth it. You know, I tell the story, which this gets me every time. 4 years ago, was standing on the ravine by my home, and I was just ready to jump. And I had a choice, and I chose to live. So I have um, I have days where it's very difficult, and many of them are.
Yeah.
And that's the honest truth. That is part of trauma, is that I'm not living in my trauma, right? It's just so much has happened to me in my life that I want the glass to be half full. It just feels so pained a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just a product of the trauma that I've been through.
Yeah. So how about the process of coming out, so to speak, with the book. And here's all your raw emotions and the experiences and the stuff that nobody knew about you before. What has that experience been like for you?
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's been terrifying. I write about in my book my whole single life. I used men. I always had this charisma with men, connection. I was always like a guy's guy, but I'm very feminine, and I've always been very attractive to the opposite sex, so to speak, from the time I was a young girl. And um, I had a very hard time being vulnerable with men. And it wasn't until I met my husband when I was 25 that it was the first man that I was vulnerable with. And when I say vulnerable, I mean like we're talking now.
Yeah.
I had never let a man in. And I have very good relationships with men, but I never let myself go there. I feel like having to talk about my book is very much like that. It's like I have to give myself permission to be vulnerable in order to help people
Mm-hmm.
be open with their vulnerability and pain. And that is very difficult for me.
Well, and that's something that we talked a little bit beforehand, that the experience that you are sharing has helped other people already, that you've already
Yeah.
got a great reception from this. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have, some reviews that I want to share because these are people, strangers that read my book.
Mhm.
And I want to just take a moment because it's remarkable. So on Amazon, she wrote, Drew made me feel seen. In her memoir, Drew discusses the trauma she was subjected to at the hands of her father, also the personal struggles with mental illness. She shines a light on the world of mental illness, showing that you are not alone in your struggles. I did not expect for this memoir to make me do as much self-reflection as I did. There were so many times when it felt like I was reading words from my old journals. Drew's writing really resonated with me. It made me feel seen. So people are really getting it. And I think, another person, I love how this person wrote this. They wrote a brave personal editorial on emotional mental disorders and the need for destigmatization. It says, do not mistake this work for a misery memoir. It is a frank and fair examination of the challenges faced by sufferers of a mental disorder, not simply by their symptoms and what might have led them to them. This is an important book. I believe Paige's memoir could and should have the same place in the canon of personal reflection on emotional disorders as Prozac Nation. And if you know Prozac Nation, my book is very much like Prozac Nation, The Glass Castle, and these like Girl Interrupted, these stories that hit at the core, and it's raw, it's real, and it doesn't shy away from the actuality of the pain that people go through. But
Mhm.
also, it's a survival story. Like, I'm still here, right?
Yeah,
And that was half the battle.
yeah. And I don't want to presume anything, but it seems like the feedback you're getting from it has kind of helped you some with your healing, having gone through it again, relived it all to write this book, left you very raw, but then hearing that you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, I have an Instagram page, Drew Paige _author, and I've had it for a year. And I have talked to, I'm not even kidding, over, I would say 80 people on direct message. And they tell me from all over the world, and they tell me their trauma and how my story has made them talk about their own.
Hmm.
So it was the first time in my life, I can't even lie, that I haven't felt alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness. That's amazing. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
What, Drew, what's next for you? More writing? Do you have something else to say?
Yeah. I mean, my dream is to make this memoir into a film. And I have been Listen, I'm relentless when it comes to going after what I want. I've been in contact with Hollywood directors, producers, and I'm hoping to make this happen. The narrative on film needs to change with mental illness. I think it just shows people who are unhinged and crazy. And the truth is, I have these statistics here, which are so important. My bringing awareness to like how normal this is. I mean, 1 in 5 US adults experience mental illness each year. And 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins at age 14 and 75% by age 24. People, listen to this, 20.6% of US adults experienced mental illness in 2019. That's 51.5 million people.
Wow.
In the US. So this is a crisis. And with the pandemic, my goal is to be an advocate for mental health. I would love a TED Talk. I would love to publicly speak, continue to be on podcasts. I don't want to be famous, right? I want this to be a bestseller to help people because not enough people understand what this is,
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been one of them for a long time. I'm one of those people, admittedly, that I know the word. I've experienced people who say they have it, and that explains certain behaviors, but I've never really understood it very much myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely going to be something I'm going to have to check out.
Thank you so much. I think, just having a conversation and like having a face to somebody who is educated, right? And who, has a family and a normal life and's never been hospitalized and all these different things. Like, I'm a normal person. It's just a matter, I had an unfortunate event and trauma that created this part of who I am, but it's not who I am,
Right.
just part of me.
And I think that's a fantastic way to wrap this up. It's just like your quote here of, in life, we're given a choice to live in our past or thrive in our future. And like you said, it's a part of your life, but it's not who you are. And you have a wonderful book that's going to educate people and inform a lot of people. I think it's going to help a lot. And I'm so thrilled you have been here with me to discuss this
Thank you so much.
wonderful book. Where can people find and follow you?
So I can be found on Instagram, Drew Paige _author. And I can be found on Twitter. I can be found, I'm actually on Stage 32, which is pretty cool. It's for, actors and authors and directors. And but I'm pretty active on Instagram and Twitter. I talk to a lot of people, and it's funny, a lot of people don't realize they're actually talking to me, like but it's me.
Yeah.
My book can be found on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and The Darkness Within, a memoir, Drew Paige, and it is, Kindle, it's 99 cents, and paperback $17.99. I think it's a pretty great price point for what it is. I think everybody should have this book. It's important to understand things that we don't understand, and so many people know somebody not with a mental illness necessarily, but who has depression, and I also have a blog, which I've only written like 4 or 5 things, but it's on medium.com. And I talk about, I'm a diehard romantic. I talk about love. I talk about life. I talk about how to help somebody who is mentally ill and what to do if, somebody is suicidal or wants to hurt themselves, because not everybody has the knowledge, So, before we're done with this conversation, I have numbers that everybody should put in their phones and their notes, because so many teenagers, young adults just don't know what the hell to do when it comes to helping somebody,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you've got that information, you can let us know, and then I'm going to make sure and have links for all this in the show notes as well.
That would be amazing. The help numbers are the National Suicide Prevention Helpline is 24/7 and it's 1-800-273-8255. The self-harm text line 741-741. The self-harm number is 1-800-448-3000 or text voice to 20121. And they're
Okay.
also in my book, actually, the numbers. So that's
Fantastic. Fantastic. Drew, again, thank you so much for being on the show. And ladies and gentlemen, time for me to step aside with my coffee and hand the floor over to my guest, Drew Paige, with The Darkness Within.
Thank you so much. So I am going to read my first chapter. This book is really a journey of my life. And, the first chapter is the night that changed everything. And that is where I am going to begin. When I was 14 years old, I was your typical teenager. I had a lot of friends and I was on the go, hanging out with my girlfriends at the movies, talking on the phone, having boyfriends, and most importantly, making sure my parents were not interrupting my social life. I was getting in a lot of trouble at this age. I had a big mouth and I thought I knew it all. I started talking back to my parents. Little did I know this would make my teenage life a living hell. I would be grounded, which meant I could not watch TV, talk on the phone, or go out and be with my friends. This made me so angry because all I wanted to do was to be social and have fun. I did not want to sit in my room bored all day and night. I especially did not want to hang out with my parents on a Friday or Saturday night. Let's be honest, that is every teenager's nightmare. One night, when I was grounded, my father came home to get tomato juice. I was alone in the house, and my mother was across the street at the neighbor's house. My older and younger sister were also out of the house that evening. My father said to me, "Who drank all of the tomato juice?" in a loud, annoyed, and stern voice that would scare a small child. I looked up smug and pissed off. Me, why? My father looked at me with hate in his eyes. "You asshole. Why would you drink that? I needed it for Bloody Marys with the neighbors." "Fuck you, asshole," I replied. Those words set off the most traumatic night of my entire life. My father came toward me. He was 6'1" and about 200 pounds at the time, while I was 5'4" and around 100 pounds. In my head, I heard the voice that your subconscious uses to tell you when you are in trouble scream at me, "Run." So I ran. He chased me and pushed me down on the stairs. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "What are you going to do? Hit me? Go ahead. I fucking hate you." So he did. With a full fist, my father punched me out cold. I saw black and then white stars, like lights in the cartoons when the cat was hit with a bat. After the stars came blackness, and then I came to. My father stood over me, and I tried to crawl up the stairs away from him, tears streaming down my face. He grabbed my hair and pulled me up the flight of stairs with it. I remember thinking, I hate him. I wish he were dead. Why is no one coming to save me? When we got to the top of the stairs, I managed to run down past them. He was raging like a fire had been set inside of his soul. I ran out the front door with no coat and no shoes. It was the dead of winter in the suburbs of Chicago and 30 degrees with snow and ice on the stoop of the house. He locked me out and stood there staring at me. As I was standing outside in a lightweight, long sleeve shirt and leggings, I thought, I cannot believe this is happening. I just kept imagining different scenarios in my head of me trying to run. I contemplated running across the street to get my mother, but as though my body was paralyzed and I could not move. I was in a state of trauma, but did not understand at the time what was happening to me. I realized it was too cold and I was not wearing any shoes, so I could not bring myself to run. Plus, my eye was swollen shut, and I did not know if I could compose myself in front of my neighbors. I had just seen the movie Misery with Kathy Bates, and I remember the main character flicking her off. As I stood outside freezing, I looked at him through the glass, flicked him off, and mouthed, "Fuck you." He just smirked as if me flicking him off did nothing at all. Outside, I was bold, fearless, and hateful, just wanting this man who happened to be my father to release me from this hell. Inside, I was just a terrified 14-year-old wanting her mother to come home and save her. He opened the door and pulled me inside by my arm. My heart was pounding, and it felt as though it would come out of my chest. The reality that I could not escape terrified me. For the next hour, he beat me and verbally abused me. There was no way for me to reach my mother. I so desperately wanted to reach her so she could save me in this moment. As my father was on top of me, choking me until I was blue in the face, I managed to whisper, "You are killing me. Let me go, please." I really thought my own father was going to kill me in this moment. In a sort of out-of-body experience, I imagined what it would look like for my mother to walk into my house and find me lying there dead on the floor. In that moment, something snapped in my father's eyes, as if he suddenly realized, holy shit, I am going to kill her if I do not release this grip on her neck. He got off me, pulled the phone out of the wall, threw it at me, and said, "Go call your fucking mother." I ran toward another phone with my eyes swollen shut, and I called my mother. In this moment, I thanked whoever was watching over me above for not letting me die. I felt so afraid of what had happened that I was shaking. My mind was on hyperspeed, trying to gather the thoughts of the madness that had taken over my father. I looked down at my striped shirt, and my mind registered that the white stripe had blood spattered on it. I felt throbbing in my eye that my father had punched, and my nose was bleeding. It felt surreal. I felt physical pain, but was even greater was the emotional pain that followed. I gathered myself in a quiet moment in my mind and then said hysterically but quietly, "Mom, Dad hurt me. Please come home." She said, "I'm coming now." Then she hung up the phone. I did not know where my father was in the house at this time, and I was so afraid he would come back to hurt me. I ran to my bathroom I shared with my sisters, and I put myself in between the toilet and the wall like a safety net to coddle me in my moment of utter terror. My mother came home and asked my father where I was. I could not make out what he had said to her. When she found me, she said, "Are you okay? Oh my God, what happened?" I just sobbed in my mother's arms. My teenage brain could not process the trauma that had just occurred. I was in a state of shock. My mother cleaned me up and helped me change clothes. As I stood outside my parents' room, my mother was screaming, "If you ever touch her again, I will divorce you." The next day, my mom put cover up on my black eye and said to me, "It only happened once." In that moment, my teenage brain did not understand why my mom would say this to me, as if it was okay it had happened at all. Little did I know, when my mother was growing up, her father beat her and her siblings. This was why she had said this to me. I realize now, as an adult of 44 years, that trauma marries trauma most times. It's the cycle of abuse, so they say. She then told me to take the day and hang out with friends. My father had convinced my sisters and mother that what had happened to me that night was not as bad as I claimed. It was not until my parents divorced when I was 23 that my sisters and mom realized I was telling the truth. He never beat me to that level again, but he would occasionally slap me, covertly sexualize me, and verbally abuse me until the age of 40. That is when I escaped the mental torment of the man I call my father.
Whoa. Holy cow. That was Drew Paige reading a sample chapter from her new book, The Darkness Within. It is a memoir and it is heavy. You definitely got to click those links in the show notes so you can pick up this book and find out more about Drew and where to follow her. And anyone out there who is suffering from any of these, or if you know someone who is, please follow along with helpline numbers also in the show notes. Don't forget to also click the links for our podcast friends and sponsors alike, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next week when I'm back with a new author, a new book, and an all-new sample chapter. Take care, everyone. I'm going to see you again real soon.